Hey, 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 potheads and political junkies. Welcome to Cannabis Culture News Live with Jeremiah Vandermeer and Marius Stoner.
And the UK cheese that you're looking at.
Yeah.
That was some UK cheese you were looking at there. We're going to smoke some of that in Duchess, who's with us. What's up, potheads and political junkies? Thanks for doing the Fat Albert opening. Hey, hey, hey. It is Friday. What is it? The 19th of October today. My goodness, we're just whipping through the months here. And I'm Jeremiah Vandermeer. This is Marius Stoner.
Hey, everyone.
We're the editors of Cannabis Culture, and you can find us at cannabisculture.com and Pod TV all the time. And today on our show, we have a really big one for you guys. We have Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML, on the show. We're going to talk about the legalization efforts in the United States, the ballot initiatives in 3 different U.S. states, as well as 3 more medical marijuana initiatives, and some other ones in cities in other places in the United States as well. So there's a lot going on there. Also, we're going to talk about the ASA's lawsuit to declassify cannabis from the Schedule I classification in the U.S. Alan will have some info about that for us. And also, I'm going to talk to him about his call for a march on Washington on 4/20/2013. So that should be fun. We got to make sure the sound and everything is working. You guys out there okay? All of our mics work?
Yeah, can you hear us all right?
Just if you can't, let us know in the chat. We always like to know. Sounds good, they say.
All right, thanks, Jack.
Awesome.
Good to see you all in the chat
Yeah,
today.
It's nice to see the chatters out there. We love the chat. Waves there, girl from Norway. Everybody says it's really good. Good to see you guys.
Nice.
So before we bring any guests out, I wanted to go over some of this news about the legalization stuff that's happening in the U.S. We're actually going to be down there, myself and Jody, and possibly Mr. Kurt Tusa. Marius will be producing stuff from back here, or we're trying to negotiate bringing him down, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So we're going to be down there in Washington State to cover on November the 6th the election, and of course. Okay, we're back. Browser crashed there or something. Not really sure what that was.
Yeah, weird things happen on Friday afternoons.
That's very true, very true. Okay, so I was talking about the legalization initiatives going on in the U.S. right now, and I wanted to play some of these videos I have here. In Washington State, oh, actually, there's something else I wanted to play before all that. Let's save the American stuff for a second. Before we get into the legalization initiatives in the U.S., there's some stuff happening on the northern side of the border that's just as interesting. Cash Heed, who you may remember if you're from British Columbia as the police chief here. He was a police chief here in BC. Now he's an MLA for the Liberal government of British Columbia. And actually, he has debated Jody before. He's actually run against Jody in the past when she was a member of the Green Party running for that particular seat. Cash Heed has just come out with a Stop the Violence BC campaign and endorsed ending prohibition for marijuana. So we always kind of thought Cash was on our side, but now he has made this really cool video with the Stop the Violence BC people, and I want to play this for you guys. Let's check this out. This was actually made by one of the people who helped make the Union, and I guess is helping make the Culture High. So this is a very slickly produced little video here. Check this out, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Shootings and gang violence have grown exponentially in recent years.
Abbotsford police say the gang problem has more than doubled in 5 years.
We are not having any success on marijuana prohibition in Canada. My mother said to me when I was very, very young, do the right thing, not the popular thing. It's very difficult for police officers to come out and say that the war on drugs has been a failure. From day one in the academy, we were taught as police officers that the way to deal with problems is to arrest people and put people in jail. And even myself as a young officer, starting in 1979, believed that we could arrest our way out of this particular problem. But over the years, as I went forward in my law enforcement career, I realized that years and years and years of spending money on enforcing prohibition for drugs has been a failure. And that is the feeling with many, many police leaders, but they publicly will not say it until they leave policing, because the culture will eat you up. And I have experienced this. They labeled me as not being one of them, as being an advocate for the drug user. Drug dealers are regulating marijuana right now. It's easier for our youth right now to go out and buy marijuana than it is to purchase alcohol and cigarettes. We need to start thinking long term. Number one is dealing with the issue of marijuana and ending prohibition and taxing the revenue that can come from marijuana. There is absolutely no way we will deal with our drug problems with our current policies, simply because there is far too much money to be made selling illicit drugs in this world. When I was a commanding officer of the drug unit, we had record-breaking interdiction of drugs here in Vancouver. We had record-breaking arrests. And we quickly realized that it did not make one iota difference, and the price did not change by 1 cent. And we found an increase in violence simply because the void has to be filled. People will get involved in the trade to make a lot of money because it is still illegal. The great demand for marijuana produced in British Columbia is the United States. So if the gangs can get their product to the United States, they can use that money to purchase cocaine to bring it back here into BC to even triple their profits. It's criminal organizations that are benefiting from the prohibition of drugs, especially the prohibition of marijuana here in British Columbia. The gang situation in Metro Vancouver is very, very serious. And we've had an excess of 300 people killed based on this prohibition of marijuana and the fact that they're getting involved in it to make some easy money. And they're not going to think twice about taking out someone in order for them to make more of a profit. If we continue with our current drug policies in Canada, we will have an increasing rate of gang violence in our communities. I'm in the political world right now. Hypocrisy is rampant. We, as citizens of Canada, need to stand up and advocate for contemporary drug policies. Let's end marijuana prohibition. Let's stop the violence that's taking place here in British Columbia. Let's end it now by ending prohibition.
All right. Cash Heed, wow. Current MLA for the Liberals, speaking out, wanting to end marijuana prohibition. Now, this has Stop the Violence BC, a part of their campaign. Man, have they had some huge successes. They've been able to convince 4 former mayors of Vancouver, 4 former attorneys general, that is. And I mean, they've had rock solid hit after rock solid hit. These guys have been amazing. So really happy to see that from those guys. Great work, Stop the Violence BC. And there was some talk in the chat about how usually politicians only speak out when the bulk of their career is over. And I mean, that's totally true. That's always how it is. Whenever these guys talk about stuff, it's usually when they don't have a heck of a lot to lose.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
That they're such cowards when they're in office.
Yeah, and the thing with Cash Heed is he is still an MLA, which is great. But of course, Cash Heed has run into some problems in the past. He's been accused in the past of election fraud, and there's an investigation, and there's been some troubles there. He's not the cleanest of the politicians out there, but I'm glad he's on our side and glad to have him nonetheless. I think it's especially powerful when a former police officer or a former police chief, no less, speaks out on these issues and says that it's a waste of money and time. So, and I see Yoda in the chat. Yoda was chilling with us yesterday in the office. Good to hang with him, and was just leafing through his book. Looks really awesome. We showed his book on the show recently. Yoda, you should put up a link to your book in the chat there for everybody. Okay, so yeah, that was Kashid. Now, just after, within hours actually, after Kashid came out and made that video, or they published the video, another Liberal MLA, Joan McIntyre, also joined the call and came out in support of Kashid, so that was nice to see. You can find all that information on the front page of Cannabis Culture. I put a link to those videos in the chat, and there's also on the front page of Pot TV and CC, you'll find links to those videos. Okay, so before we bring Stephen Gray on the show, he's in studio today from the Spirit Medicine Plant Conference. We're going to play a few of these videos from the U.S. and the legalization campaigns that are going on down there. Now, the first one I want to play is from Colorado.
Hi, this is Melissa Etheridge, and I'm encouraging you to vote yes on Amendment 64. Because a few years ago, I was going through cancer chemotherapy, and I was suffering. The nausea, the pain, it was terrible. Prescription drugs were not helping. The only thing that allowed me to function and regain my strength was marijuana, and I'm grateful for the relief it provided me. You know, before I needed to use marijuana, I just accepted the laws that treat marijuana users as criminals. But it's funny how a serious illness can give you a new outlook on life. I now see that it's wrong to arrest adults for using marijuana, and it's even more wrong to allow gangs and cartels to profit from selling marijuana. Instead, we should allow adults to possess limited amounts of marijuana, and we should regulate marijuana sales in order to generate tax revenues for public school construction and other community needs. To me, regulating marijuana is simply the right thing to do. Please vote yes on Amendment 64, paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana.
All right, so I don't know what's going on out there, but you guys only really saw half of that ad, I think. It turned black halfway through the ad. It turned black when I was talking first, and then black halfway through the ad. This doesn't seem to be anything that we have control over, unfortunately. This seems to be something with Livestream. I've never actually seen it stop halfway through a video like that before. No, that's the first time for that. No, and it ain't a tech guy, Romulan. We're doing everything by the book here, so it's really on Livestream's end. I'm pretty sure about that. We're all plugged in directly and everything, so we'll do our best. If it goes black, you'll just have to stay with us. We'll flip it back on right afterwards. So oh yeah, it does. Oh man. Well, I'm not sure what's going on. Everything seems to be running fine. Our internet's perfectly fast and stuff, but it just keeps blacking out. I don't know. We're gonna have to just keep going and see what happens here, guys. I really don't know what else to tell you, but it's a big show today. I don't know why Livestream doesn't want us to show you what we have on the program today, but all right, maybe we should just skip the rest of the stuff here and go. Well, actually, it's a 420, so we're gonna have to have a bong rip before we do anything. I'm going to smoke some of this cheese in Duchess. Yeah, so those ads, there was that ad. There's a couple others I wanted to play, some really slickly produced ones from Washington State. One featuring Mark Emery's former prosecutor, John McKay, which was a really good one. Let's just see if we can quickly watch that, and then we'll come back on the other side. This one's really short, so this is Washington ad number one. This is John McKay in a New Approach Washington ad for legalization in Washington State. Check it out.
As the former chief federal prosecutor, I enforced our marijuana laws. I've come to believe they don't work. Filling our courts and jails has failed to reduce marijuana use, and drug cartels are pocketing all the profits. It's time for a new approach. Initiative 502 brings marijuana under tight regulatory control, generates new revenue for education and prevention. And if we pass 502, we'll have more resources to go after violent crime instead. Yes, on 502.
Marijuana legalization is on the Oregon ballot this November. I'm just one of over 500,000 Oregon adults who use marijuana annually, and I'm asking you to vote yes on Measure 80. Measure 80 would finally end the futile prohibition of marijuana and institute regulations that treat marijuana like alcohol. Measure 80 would end the facade of police trying to determine who is sick or healthy enough to put in a cage over a plant. Measure 80 provides jobs and tax revenue that Oregon desperately needs and institutes the industrial hemp crop our legislators already legalized. Best of all, Measure 80 protects our children by imposing the same educational and ID carding requirements that have brought teen alcohol drinking and tobacco smoking to their lowest ever recorded levels. Marijuana smokers are your family, your coworkers, and your friends, and we are 1 out of every 7 Oregon adults who deserve the same respect as our friends who enjoy fine Oregon wines and craft beers. We may be the only Oregonians who want to pay more taxes. Please donate to Oregonians for Law Reform at OregonLawReform.com and help us help Oregon by passing Measure 80.
All right, what's up, guys? Okay, so yeah, that was Russ Belville, his cool video. I really hope Oregon passes it as well, but it's not looking so great there. We're going to talk to Alan St. Pierre about all of those legalization initiatives a little bit further on in the program. But before that, there's a Spirit Plant Medicine Conference happening on October 26th to 28th, the University of British Columbia. Stephen Gray, and now this is from the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference website. Stephen Gray's been a lifelong student, teacher, and researcher of spiritual paths, in particular Tibetan Buddhism and peyote ceremonies of the Native American Church. And now he's the organizer of this Spirit Plant Medicine Conference coming up. Stephen, good to have you on the show. Okay. All right. Well, if Goodwin or anybody at Vapor Central is out there watching and they're queuing cameras, please don't queue cameras because it's busting up our system. I don't know if you guys are, but we noticed that a camera is being queued up somewhere. So if there's somebody out there queuing up a camera, please stop it. We want to talk to our guest. So Stephen Gray, good to have you on the show. Maybe before we get into the conference, you could just tell us a little bit about you and how you got interested in this particular path of research.
Well, you know, I'm a child of the 60s, the dreaded baby boom generation, and, you know, in the late 60s, there was dovetailing between an interest in spirituality, particularly from the eastern part of the planet, and an interest in psychedelics, right? Would you rather I look over there, or can I talk to you?
You can talk to me or look right at the camera.
I'd rather talk to you, frankly,
basically, this is the way it works. It's you're looking out to all these wonderful viewers out there, so that's the monitor.
Yeah, hello, wonderful viewers. Anyway, so there were these two sort of streams of interest which were very closely connected, which was interest in spirituality, particularly, as I say, Asian spirituality with Hinduism and Buddhism,
yeah,
and an interest in psychedelics. And you could break down some of the directions that people wanted to go with the psychedelics. Some of them were like, you know, ooh, this is something exciting. And a lot of other people fairly quickly realized, even though, and maybe we can talk about this later, the setting, the environment wasn't necessarily conducive to having a good experience or having a deep experience of connecting with your own larger spirit. Right. But nonetheless, a lot of people got the message to one degree or another. So I got interested in all that at the time. And you know, did some pretty bad, some pretty bad ritual or lack of ritual, you know, situations with acid, LSD, a couple of other things. But I did have a couple of really powerful experiences, and was always fascinated by the potential of these things. I had a book that in my hands at one point called "The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment," and basically his whole philosophy. His philosophy kind of boiled down to, he said, if you forget everything else in this book, remember one thing: no resistance, right? Pay attention, just open up to whatever's coming, you know, and ride with it.
If you resist, you might have a bad trip. Okay, yeah, there it is. All right. So we just got rid of one of the users that seems to be queuing up this camera that seems to be causing us problems. It may be a glitch or something going on with Livestream. We're not actually sure. But there is a camera queuing up, killing ours. So whoever's out there, stop it. Anyways, we were right in the middle of
yeah. Okay. So I'll kind of speed this up a little bit, but so a lot of people realized there was something more than the individual separate ego, you know, that Buddhism talks about as a great illusion, right? But a lot of people felt like they needed to go somewhere else with this. You know, they'd had some realizations, they didn't quite know what to do with it. So a lot of people moved over toward spiritual practice, meditation in particular, that type of thing. And that's where I went with it. I got involved with Tibetan Buddhism for a number of years. It kind of was central to my life for 10 to 15 years or so. In the late 80s, I happened upon Terence McKenna, who you know, right? And lots of other people do, yeah. And Terence was the perfect, you know, bit of, if you'll accept the pun, medicine at the time. This was in 1988 or so, 9. I was living in Los Angeles. I actually went to a talk that he gave in Ojai. And Terence's thing was that, you know, following up up on this thing that I mentioned about the late 60s, early 70s, that these two sort of streams of understanding, psychedelics and spiritual practice, go together really well. But he brought it into the shamanic, indigenous, traditional kind of realm and went, oh, yeah, there's people that have been doing this for thousands of years, right? So, and there's, amazing things to be learned about life, about yourself, when you do these substances with an intent, with a clear intention in a good kind of environment. So for me, to keep the story, rather short, where that eventually led over the next few years was me connecting with the Native American Church and their peyote prayer ceremonies. And I've been involved with them, loosely for about 9 years now. I've probably done 30 to 40 of their peyote prayer ceremonies with the peyote sacrament. And that was, I felt exactly what I was looking for. Here were people who really knew how to create a container. I mean, way beyond my imagination, actually, because every element of these ceremonies has got deep resonance, deep symbolism to it that goes back a long way in their history. The drum is a being, right? The fire is a being. The gourd, they all transmit energies and messages and vibrations. So they really knew how to work with this medicine, like these other, entheogens, psychedelics, whatever you want to call them, right? So, and in the course of that period of time, I've also worked with ayahuasca a little bit, been down to conferences in Peru a couple of times, spoke at one in last 2011. I spoke at one of those conferences down in Iquitos in northern Peru. So I've just been interested in this. I've always been interested in, spiritual growth and all that, and the plants seem to me, when used wisely, by the right people in the right hands in the right environment, in some sense, the most direct, the most powerful tools we have, if we can get our hands around them, properly, right? Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me because you mentioned a lot of different religions in what you were saying there. And
Yeah.
it's always, I wonder about the perennial sort of philosophy in all of these things. So
Yeah.
it seems, there's a lot of different, in those religions, I'm sure there's lots of differentiations,
Yeah.
but there seems to be this fundamental sort of thread in all of them. And I don't know, do you think that speaks to the fact that this is something fundamental about life?
Absolutely, yeah. It's unconditioned reality, I guess you could call it. I'll tell a brief anecdote that might answer that. This roadman or ceremony leader from the Native American Church, one morning, there'd be like 30 or 40 people sitting around in a teepee and going through the night, with this medicine and the prayer songs and different things like that. This particular ceremony, there were perhaps 6 or 7 people who'd never been to one of these things before, who were not part of the Native American tradition, non-Native people. And this fellow, Canucas, looked around the teepee and he said, relatives, if you're new here, you may wonder what you experienced last night. And he said, it probably won't make much difference that I tell you, because you have to find it for yourself anyway. But what you encountered last night was reality. It's as simple as that, right? The Native people tend not to, overthink and analyze these things. It's like you can either understand that or not. You don't have to explain it in a series of books. It's like it's reality. It's what Buddhists call the primordial or unconditioned reality. It's not based on opinion. It's not based on belief. It's not something anyone cooked up. It's like what happens when you're able to dissolve the obscurations between you and what is. My old Buddhist teacher used to say, when you dissolve all that stuff, you land on what is, right? Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny, on my list I had a little bullet here that said ineffable sensations on mushrooms, because I recently did mushrooms on the show, actually. Marius and I took some mushrooms on the show, and that was fun.
I'll
It was a really
bet.
great trip, and as part of it I felt this sort of linear time had just totally evaporated.
Yeah.
And it was ineffable for me to try and describe the feelings that I had to anybody afterwards.
Yeah.
There's no way to really put it in the English language. It's
Yeah.
just an experience that you have to experience.
Yeah, language is just a series of symbols that sort of point toward things, right? Yeah.
Exactly. It's a map, not the territory.
Yeah, so experience is everything, obviously. So, and again, to put a plug in for the conference, that's what we're doing with the conference, is trying to point people toward the best ways to encounter these plants so that they can can have that experience, or if they've already had those experiences, how they can take them further, and also how they can bring them out into the world and move this work forward. Because those people who have had a lot of experience with these plants, you know, are passionate about the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, when used right, they can be the direct path, you know, to this awakening, to this unconditioned landing on what is thing, right? Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, let's talk a little more about the conference.
Yeah, sure.
Now, this isn't the first one you've done. This is...
I was much less involved last year. There was one last year. I spoke at it on cannabis actually last year, and I helped in a kind of a casual sense with some of the organization. This year I'm co-organizing it with Andrew Resmer from Conscious Living Network.
Okay.
So I'm quite involved in it this year. Yeah.
Great. And what about, can we talk a little about some of the speakers who are coming? And
Definitely.
What they're talking about?
Yeah, you're hitting all the right points.
Hey man, that's the way I roll. Got to get the info out.
Yeah, no, that's great. Appreciate it. Yeah. So, well, we've got 3 people that I would consider our sort of main featured presenters that are coming in from far away. One of them is Stefan Bayer. He's one of the leading experts, you know, outside of the actual people themselves from the Amazon. He's one of the leading kind of non-native sort of scholar experts on ayahuasca and the whole world surrounding the shamanic use of it. He's written a book that's about this thick called Singing to the Plants, and I've read it. It really goes into depth. The subtitle is A Guide to Mestizo Shamanism of the Upper Amazon, and he spent a lot of time down there. He spent the last 2 or 3 decades spending a lot of time in the Amazon and really getting inside that world and finding out, you know, what the shamans are saying and what they understand about, you know, spirit and, you know, the dark side of ayahuasca, which is also important, you know, the dark side of ayahuasca usage, you know, and shamanism and all that. So he's explored that in depth, and he's done a lot of speaking. He's a master of this work. He's coming.
Describe what you mean about, like, what that dark side. Maybe explain that just a teeny little bit. Don't go too crazy.
Yeah.
People want to come to the conference to hear.
Yeah. Well, I'm not an expert on it, but it is something that people should know about in general when they get into these worlds. Part of it has to do with the old Latin saying "caveat emptor," you know, buyer beware. Because especially, and this is actually a really important point, and it will be addressed at the conference, especially as ayahuasca and other medicines, but especially ayahuasca, move out further into the world, as they have done and are likely to do much more. There's, you know, a great temptation for people who are poorly trained and even have poor intentions, you know, what you might call a charlatan, to get involved in this kind of work. And so it's important for people to, you know, come into it with their eyes open, not naively, right? And, you know, get some guidance, you know, talk to people who have done it before and that you trust, and find out who's a good person to work with, you know, because of what I just said, right? But in the Amazon, there's also, well, there's a tradition. It's actually everywhere. Interestingly enough, when you talk to some of these people about it, they'll point you back toward your own culture sometimes too. But because we don't recognize, in general, the existence of non-embodied energies, you know, spirit energies, we don't tend to sort of shamanize it or to speak about it as, you know, things that people would send like psychic negative energy toward each other. We don't really acknowledge or recognize that much, but you know, those people would probably say it's there in our culture. But in those cultures, it's well known. And it has to do, you know, with your intention and who you are as a person who's becoming an ayahuasquero shaman too, right? So you have the people on the good side and you have people on the dark side, and the people on the dark side tend to be people who never have done their work fully, you know, their inner work, right? So they get hooked by power, right? Or maybe all kinds of things. Jealousy, they see somebody else who's got a deeper understanding of this work than they do. They see maybe people being attracted to work with that person. They become jealous. They want to bring that person down. So they seem to have, the ayahuasca spirit seems to be able to help people with that. It's kind of non-judgmental in a way, right? It'll come in and you can actually contact, from what I understand, is secondhand. I haven't experienced anything like this, but you know, from Steve Byer's book and others. If you've got negative intentions, you can bring energies into play to enhance or empower those intentions, right? So they talk about things like psychic darts, you know, that you can actually make somebody sick like another shaman, or you can potentially kill them. It's on the record down there, right? Yeah, black magic you could call it. Yeah. So there is definitely that dark side, and so moving this work forward in general, it's really important for everybody who's interested and involved to pay attention to that and keep this work on a solid ethical footing, and also for people who go into, in case anyone's listening to this and is thinking about being an ayahuasca ceremony leader, I would say, don't, if you're not 100% clear on your intentions, and get yourself properly trained. I have personal friends who are ayahuasca shamans up here, and they're not too happy with some elements of the way this is developing, because one of them, for example, he's been studying with a Peruvian shaman for about 11 years now. He spends a lot of his personal money going down there a couple times a year and training under the guy. He does these extensive, what they call dietas, plant diets, where you work with one plant, you cut out meat and a whole bunch of other foods from your diet, and a sexual experience for several months at a time even, and you just get to know these different power plants, not just ayahuasca, but a whole range of them. So it's a deep, arduous training involved, and until you really get it and you have a connection with the spirits, right, you bring those spirits in to work for you as allies, you probably shouldn't be doing this work, or at least not on your own. You should be working with a master, right? Yeah.
Well, when you're dealing with other people who are supposed to be under you and learning from you,
absolutely, yeah.
You know everything about it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you're not passing on bad habits to other people.
Absolutely. Well, for example, this particular fellow I mentioned, I was at a ceremony. Well, actually, no, I don't think it was a ceremony that I was at. But he mentioned one time when a dark force, like a non-embodied energy, came into the ceremonial space. It was just in an actual ayahuasca ceremony. And he said he really had to rouse a lot of energy. He knew the right songs to sing to dissolve that energy, or to move that energy away, right? First of all, if you didn't see that coming, you wouldn't even know it was there. And if you didn't know what to do about it, same result, right? Yeah. So this stuff's really important. Yeah.
Now, ayahuasca is it takes a lot to sort of get to the active ingredient through that process. That's DMT, right? In ayahuasca, is that correct?
That's the so-called psychoactive alkaloid,
That's
the
right.
primary one. But it's a combination of a few things too. There's harmaline in the vine, which on its own apparently doesn't do much, but in conjunction with DMT it does have an effect on it. And some of them use other plants as well. They've put in certain kinds of datura that they call toei. I think that's pronounced toei anyway. And some other plants. Some of them will put admixtures of up to 7 or 8 different plants. But the two key ingredients that you gotta have are the vine, which is the Banisteriopsis caapi, and a DMT-containing plant such as Psychotria viridis, I think it's pronounced, or also known as chacruna, because it's the DMT is the sort of the powerhouse, but on its own, it's made orally inactive, and the vine itself. In combination with it, the vine it contains an MAO, monoamine oxidase, which so we have MAO in our, it's a MAO inhibitor in the vine. We have MAO in our stomachs, which neutralizes the DMT when we take it orally, which is why you can smoke it and have the effect, because it doesn't hit the oral system, right? Exactly. But so the MAO inhibitor in the vine knocks out our MAO enough for the DMT to go and do its job. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So on the website, it talks about how this is becoming more popular these days. Or I mean, do you think that there's an awakening happening right now? And there's the word.
Oh boy, how long do we have? Like 10 o'clock tonight? You and I talked for an hour about this stuff on the phone. Right. Yeah. But before I answer that,
awakening.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one can hardly do it. How much time do we have left?
Another about 12 minutes.
Okay.
12, 13 minutes.
Sure.
Like
can I come back to that question? Because first of all, I want to mention our 2 other main feature presenters that you asked me about that question earlier.
Right.
And also I want to make sure we mention about the cannabis panel, because this is Cannabis Culture, and I've got a panel with some people I just want to make brief mention of.
Fantastic.
So the other 2 main presenters that they're coming from the States. One is Kathleen Harrison. She was married to Terrence McKenna for quite a long time, and she's I would say a kind of a world-leading ethnobotanist whose specialty is these kinds of plants.
Yeah.
She's great. She was here last year. People loved her. Are we good?
I think
is the
so.
mic on?
I think so.
Okay.
The mic is getting closer and closer to my face.
Creeping up here, yeah. So
Okay, go ahead.
she's coming, and she's lovely. She'll be doing a couple of talks, one called Psilocybin, Consciousness and Reciprocity, because it's not, I'll just say this really briefly. We have to move out of a consumer mentality and realize that it's a relationship. And in fact, in terms of your question about the awakening, which I'll just mention this briefly now, the awakening is about reconnecting to our reciprocal relationship with everything, right? With spirit, with planet, with each other, so that we don't, so that we realize what I think Chief Seattle once said, is that anything you do to any part of the web, you do to yourself, right? So we are the world.
Taking, it's giving as well.
Yeah, we are the world, and if we destroy our environment, we destroy ourselves eventually, right? So anyway, she's great, and then the other one is James Fadiman, who's a legend in this kind of work. He's in his 70s now. He goes back to the 60s. He knew Timothy Leary in that crowd. He's a PhD graduate in this kind of work, and he has a book recently called The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. He's really big on this set and setting issue that I mentioned earlier, how to create the right kind of therapeutic environment or ritual container for people to have positive experiences when they go into these deep, powerful states that take them out of their egos and open up the imaginal realms, in a way that can be uncontrolled and sometimes dangerous. But his focus is on how to manage those states and bring people through them. And he's apparently a really good speaker. I haven't heard him speak, but apparently he's really good. He's got a lot of sense of humor and warm with people and that.
Environment makes such a difference when you're having your trip. It can really make or break it.
Yeah.
I know just from even being on mushrooms, if I'm inside and cooped up too much, I just don't like it. I have to be more outdoors and things like that. So there's all kinds of different, it must. Very cool. It sounds good. Who else is on the list?
Well, there's a few more people. There's too many to mention in this 10 minutes or so that we have left.
We'll get you to
here.
drop the website address for people as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's spiritplantmedicine.com. Or you can also phone if you're looking for tickets. 604. This number 604-644-4447. Lots of fours in there. 604-644-4447. But I want to mention the cannabis panel because of the environment we're in here, and your little bong pipe sitting
That's
there.
Right.
Yeah.
Duchess, that's her name.
What's that?
Her name is Duchess.
Hello, dear.
That's right. Yeah. Named by the people watching the show, actually.
Oh yeah. Cool. So one of the things, Andrew Resmer, who's kind of the founder of Conscious Living Network, asked me to speak about cannabis last year, and I did. And I didn't want to do the same thing again this year, so I thought I'd have a panel. So I've got Chris Bennett, who everybody here knows, I'm sure, right?
Yep.
Was
on the show last week, or
great.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, okay. And, he's going to be there on this panel. And also, have you met Dee Dussault?
Yes, I have. Yeah, Dee was doing a ganja yoga actually in this very spot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I saw an interview with, is it Marius?
Marius, that's correct.
Yeah, you interviewed her.
Yeah, that was on this show.
Yeah,
she's been on the show too.
Right. Yeah. So I met her through Chris, and I was impressed with her, and like her energy, who she is, and also this work that she does with ganja yoga. And so she's going to be on the panel. And also a fellow who hangs out around my neighborhood down at J.J. Bean at 6th and Commercial, named Ross Nicolesh. He's a Rastafarian. Oh. So we're going to get the Rastafarian perspective. And the focus of it, there's a whole bunch of ways to use cannabis, obviously, many of which can be beneficial, but because of the concept of the conference, what we're looking at is cannabis and spirituality. How can cannabis awaken you, really? Yeah, so how to do that, and different ways to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to see this. I really want to see this.
Good, yeah.
And so, very cool. And now it's over 2 days.
Sort of
3 days?
2 in an evening.
2 in an evening.
Yeah, Friday evening starts registration at 6:30. Opening ceremony with a blessing from Musqueam Band Elder at 7:30. And that goes till 10 that night, then 10 to 10 Saturday and 10 to 5 Sunday. There'll be little bits of sort of more meditative shamanic music stuck in here and there, a couple of films, stuff like that. Yeah, by the way, it may sound like a sales pitch, but it's really true. It's a great price because it's really cheap. It's a lot cheaper than an ayahuasca ceremony, for one thing, and it includes 3 meals, 3 vegan meals provided by Eternal Abundance, vegetarian cafe or vegan vegetarian cafe.
All inclusive.
Included in that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And what's the price?
Currently they keep changing it. Depends on how many tickets they have available. Right
tiers,
now, they're doing tiers. Yeah, I think right now it's $188.
Yeah. Oh, that's not bad for 2
No, it's not bad at all, really. You know, you think about it.
Meals included.
Yes. Yeah.
That's good.
So do we still have time to talk about your question about the awakening?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely, we do.
So. Yeah, I can say a few things about that. I don't consider myself, an authority on the issue any more than you or anybody else, but I have my feelings about it, or my kind of intuitions about it. I don't think anyone can really know, what the state of the onion is, as it were, but there's this notion that the trajectory, the karma of the material illusion has run its course. It's pretty much close to hitting the wall if it hasn't already. Actually, one of my Native American elder friends said, it's a little bit like The Sixth Sense, that movie. Did you see that movie?
Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
Where the guy thinks he's alive, but he's not.
Right.
And we think he's alive until near the end too, right? At least I did. And so she said it's actually a little like that. It's like this culture has this old culture, the material one, the illusory one of the illusion of the separation of ego has already died. And really, it's like the Titanic. The engine has been shut off, but they're still coasting toward the iceberg, right? So. There's a lot going on. Obviously, if you pay attention, just scoot around the internet a little bit, you'll see there's an amazing amount of good work going on, right? But at the same time, there's an amazing amount of denial going on too. So, that's why I say I don't really know. I like to think that there's a great awakening going on, and it's pretty much the only thing that's going to save our asses. But how it unfolds, I don't know. There's a lot of visions from indigenous people about this and how it's going to come about, and I don't think any of them are to be taken literally, in a fundamental way. But the Hopi have prophecies about this time, the Maya, and these people, who knows how well you can predict the future, but these people are have deep connections with spirit, so I would say that when they say these things, they've been told these things by spirit, They've been said, here's what the Hopi have these. I forget what it's called. The Hopi prophecy, actually, yeah. And they predicted the coming of the white man, as did a number of these other people, and they predicted the hippies finding out about native ways, back in the 70s. They predicted the crisscrossing of the continent with roads and telegraph wires and all that stuff,
Yeah, I always wonder when I'm looking back at these things like Nostradamus or any of these things where there's the interpretations taken from ancient writings and things. I always wonder how much is interpretation and how much is actually concrete, or so I'd love to look at some of this research. Same with the Mayan stuff. There's so many interpretations of that writing and what they were saying. It's just hard to know what they were really trying to mean.
I think most of the scholars would agree that the calendar ends now, either last year with a resonance carrying over till winter solstice this year, or on the winter solstice of this year. But as to what that means, is a whole other thing.
Yeah. If it means anything at all.
Yeah, if it means anything at all. Actually, Terence McKenna once joked that the reason the calendar doesn't go any further is because they ran out of room.
Yeah, right. Well, I have a calendar at my house that ends in 2013, so...
But apart from all that, there's a kind of a deeper intuition, that suggests that we need to get our relationship to life straight. We need to make this reconnection, of seeing our, that's why the Native people have this phrase, all my relations or all my relatives, right? They mean that, we are all related. And until we get that, until enough of us get that, we're on a destructive course, right? Yeah, up until recently we've been able to get away with it, but now we've reached the limits of what the planet is willing to put up with, as it were, right? So, yeah, I can't specifically answer your question. You probably have your own insights about where we stand in terms of the awakening, but
I'm not so sure. Sometimes I think that people are waking up to this, as you said, the fact that we're not individuals on one level. We're all part of this same thing together, and we're sharing this reality. And I wonder, sometimes I think people are getting it, and then I look around sometimes and I'm not so sure, but I guess we'll find out. And maybe it's something that just is constantly in change. Maybe there is no end goal. Maybe it's this constant path that just continues and continues.
Absolutely.
You know, and as we get closer and closer and closer, it just keeps dividing and dividing and getting smaller and smaller. So it's like the asymptote.
Yeah,
it reminds me of my DMT trip. Yeah.
Well, I agree with you that that's very possible. However, we do seem to have reached a crisis point on the planet.
That's true.
You know, there's so many people on the planet. Some people predict we'll be up to 10 billion by 2050, and we just have to get a lot smarter. You know.
Absolutely. Or we won't be here anymore.
No, I would say so. Yeah. Who knows? We'll see. I'm hopeful. Definitely, that's one of the things that keeps me going, because the thing is, it's what I was saying earlier. It's the unconditioned reality. So it's not like just yet another way of doing things. It's like once we start to grow up and wake up, as is happening, I think, then we actually fall upon reality in that sense, right? Yeah. And this is all part of it. And I just want to say one last thing, if I may, because in some sense, the great secret is that what we're all capable of. In Buddhism, they talk about it. They say you already are Buddha. The word Buddha just simply means awake, right? Is a sense of stillness, and this is why set and setting and ritual container and all that are so important for maximizing the potential of the use of these plants. Is that when you get the right container and you're in the right place, there's this potential of emptying into the stillness, and in the stillness, everything is possible, right? The truth is possible. In Buddhism, they talk about shunyata, which is emptiness. And there's a phrase that goes, emptiness becomes luminosity. So once you are able to still your mind and relax into this, place of, as you referred to earlier, this thing about time, right? The timeless moment of now. In a true sense, it's not a theory, it's not a concept, it's something that people can experience. And once you do settle into that, then possibility opens up for true intelligence. Yeah, McKenna was on about that. Love, sex, and intelligence, I think he said, were the three pillars.
Well, it's fascinating stuff. And thank you very much for coming on, Stephen. I'm going to do my best to come to the conference. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible or not, but I would really love to see these things. So we'll definitely keep people updated on what you're doing. Now, you guys are planning to have a conference next year again, I imagine?
I hope so.
You hope so? Okay.
Too soon to say now, but I certainly hope so.
Excellent. We'll see how it goes this year, I guess. Fantastic. Thanks a lot for coming on. Excellent.
Yeah, nice to talk with you. Excellent.
Stephen Gray, and that's at UBC at the University of British Columbia, and that's October 26th to 28th, coming up very soon here. And you can get your tickets. What was that website one more time, Stephen? What was that website one more time?
www.spiritplantmedicine.com. Okay, or phone 604, too many fours, 644-4447.
Fantastic. Excellent. All right. Yeah, that sounds very, very interesting. Since I had my mushroom trip, I've really been sort of off on these philosophical tangents, so we've been doing a few of them on the show here for you guys. Okay, so I want to play a video before we bring out Mr. Alan St. Pierre. Well, he's not actually here in studio. We're going to bring him on by telephone. He's in Washington, D.C. Now, he has called for a march on Washington, D.C., a national march. People from all over the place come to the National Mall in Washington, D.C. on 4/20, April 20th, 2013, to demand an end to marijuana prohibition. So let's watch this little clip. This was Alan St. Pierre at the recent NORML conference discussing this particular issue. I'm just going to cue that up.
We started NORML in 1991. The single biggest request, the single biggest biofeedback you get. I've done almost 30,000 radio shows for NORML in the last 22 years. I do all the Q&A. You come, we do the questions and answers during the call-ins. And then, if you read High Times Magazine's comment section, which I do every month, the number one thing you can see festering in the community, what we want, which I've talked about for years at podiums at NORML, is that national march and protest in Washington, D.C. Rick Steves is absolutely correct. Dominic Holden is absolutely correct in the studio at this lectern yesterday and said that using marijuana is a civil right. This is a civil rights issue for them. and I agree with them clearly. So, here's the task. Here's something every single one of us can get enthused about and concentrate and fund in the next 9 months. We were denied community here this weekend, and I apologize for that. I look forward to meeting and hanging out with people at NORML conferences, turning on that green light, if you will, and enjoying the sacrament and the medicine with everybody here. Everybody will share with me. So we were denied that community here this weekend. That's the first time in about 10 years that we haven't been able to have a medication station or a vapor lounge. April 20th this year is on a Saturday. Jill, Sabrina, and I have a meeting in a couple of weeks with the National Park Service, where I hope we will walk out of there with the permit, which I have already applied for, to hold the national rally to legalize marijuana April 20th of 2013. If we don't get the permit, we're going to litigate and we will win as sure as I'm wearing 2 shoes. So, what I'm asking you to do is to pull out your iCalendar, iGoogle, whatever, and commit to both come for the community and the protest, and commit the needed funding so that we can have that proverbial national, Rick was right, and so was Dominic. Women's rights, black minority rights, gay, lesbian, all of them have succeeded, and one of the aspects, one of the allegories of that success that we can all look at is the fist-pumping or maybe joint-holding protests that we all have wanted to do in Washington, D.C. And because 420 shows up on a Saturday this year, I think this is the year. So whether you own or operate a dispensary, if you're a lawyer, if you're involved in cultivation centers or cannabis testing, think about committing 5% of your after taxes, 5% of your profit, or what's left over after you pay the bill, shall we say, to fund this national protest this year. It's something we can all get behind and enthused about. And I would suggest to you, we're not a civil rights movement unless we do that. So, yes, that is what I'm sending everybody out of here with. The idea that we will reconvene again Saturday, April 20 in Washington, D.C. It doesn't matter whether Mr. Romney is the president and we're going to be in his face, or whether it's Mr. Obama, and we want to remind him about how great it is to assimilate and to sit up on the mountains with his chew gang and smoke marijuana. It doesn't matter who the president is. We are going to be in Washington, and we are going to demand him that we want marijuana legalized. We don't want to be treated like criminals, and we want to end this 75-year war against us. And we're the only ones that can do it. We've been doing it for 40 years. There's no way this can last another 40 years. So the next time I see all of your faces in a collective way, let's make it a sunny day in Washington, D.C. I don't know when the next NORML conference is going to be, but that April 20th date is absolutely set in stone. Bless you all. Thank you for your support and enthusiasm. And let's all be normal tonight and smoke some really great weed.
I have a bong rip loaded up here that I'm going to smoke before we end the show. Yeah, that was great. Thanks to Alan for coming on, and thanks to Stephen Gray. Marius, was everything okay over there with the light? You seem to have a problem or something.
Oh, well, yeah, the light was just blaring off
I see. We've had a little issues with the lighting here. We're in our lounge, and you can see out the windows here. I'm going to get out of the way for a second. Here, even move this out of the way for a second. A beautiful lounge behind us here. I guess that wasn't really much of a view, but it was an attempt. It's beautiful out there. What we really need to do, Marius, I think, is set up a camera out onto the pot block, pointing over at the park there, and we can flip to the pot block cam every once in a while and show off what's going on outside. That'd be fun. Yeah, we could do other things like this as well. All right, I'm going to take this bong rib, and before we end the show, I'm just going to leave you guys with a couple videos from Colorado. The initiative there has been getting some pretty good press, and one of the big unions there has come out in favor of it. And once you get these unions behind you and some of the other groups, it's looking good in Colorado. I need a lighter. Marius, do you have a lighter? I seem to have lost mine. All right. Thanks to Duchess for holding it down on the show. Delicious. All right. Well, that was a fun show. Thanks to all my guests. Thanks to Marius, as usual. And I guess we'll be back next week. It's getting closer, though, to the election. November 6th. We'll be down in Washington State, so don't forget about that. Watch pot.tv on the 6th to see our election coverage. All right, Marius, can you cue up? Actually, I'll just cue it up here. I got it right now. This is the first clip I'm going to play is just a short one. Colorado unions are in support, and then I'll play another one from CBS Colorado. So anyways, guys, I'll see you guys next Friday. Before that, I'm sure I'll see you either on Monday, Wednesday, somewhere out there on Pod TV. Love you guys, and see you in the chat. Peace.
Channel 5 is your election headquarters, and today, Colorado's largest union came out in support of Amendment 64, which is to regulate marijuana like alcohol. The regional chapter of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union represents 25,000 members in Colorado and Wyoming. Officials from the nation's oldest building and construction trades union says the amendment will create jobs and boost state and local economies.
Colorado needs good jobs. Workers need good jobs. Amendment 64 will be a job generator. Right now, many of the producers of marijuana are doing it underground. Doesn't it make sense to bring it above ground?
The union also says the war on drugs has been a costly failure, and regulating marijuana would take power away from drug cartels and criminals who profit.
With less than a month to go before Election Day, one of Colorado's most heated issues continues to draw attention. Amendment 64 would regulate marijuana like alcohol, and while some say it would make for better business, others say it sends the wrong message about our state. CBS's Barry Peterson has more.
So this is Jezebel.
This is Jezebel.
Wanda James is readying her new Denver restaurant. She and her husband Scott once ran a marijuana dispensary and marketed foods with marijuana in them. Now, they're active supporters of a state constitutional amendment to make it legal in Colorado for adults over 21 to possess 1 ounce of marijuana and grow up to 6 plants for personal use.
If you would like to come home and have a joint and relax with your wife or your husband, I see absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. There are more ways to relax than just having someone have a can of Coors or a Jim Beam.
Colorado is already one of 17 states that allow marijuana for medical use. With more than 500 dispensaries and carefully monitored growers, the business pumps $11 million a year into Colorado state coffers. Proponents argue taxes from wider marijuana use would generate millions more for school construction.
Let's have marijuana tax money go to our schools rather than criminals in Mexico.
That argument falls flat with Amy Baca-Olert, Vice President of the Colorado Education Association. Baca-Olert says legalizing marijuana contradicts the anti-drug message taught in schools.
Marijuana has impacts, negative impacts on attention span, brain development, all of these things that impact learning.
Colorado's governor and local law enforcement officials here worry about a potential conflict with federal law that makes possessing or growing marijuana a crime. Jefferson County Sheriff Ted Mink fears legalization will attract outsiders to grow here and sell to the rest of the country.
I lived in Colorado most of my life, and this is not what I think Colorado is about, is to become the marijuana capital of the United States.
State Representative Jonathan Singer supports the idea of treating marijuana like alcohol. A former drug counselor, Singer has seen the effects of drug abuse, but he says most people who use marijuana do so responsibly.
Marijuana has a potential, just like any other drug, to hurt people, and people need to make that informed decision. But this is not cocaine. This is not meth. This is not heroin.
A win here could boost legalization efforts elsewhere, while a loss would be a sign that marijuana use is one right many Americans are not willing to grant. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Denver.
Now, locally, the Mesa County Sheriff's Office has spoken out against